We are chapter 3 of the book of Shmuel. The story that begins with this chapter is we're going to find that Shmuel has his first prophecy, and the leadership seems to be, in a certain sense, leaving Eli and being leaving Eli's family, and somehow Shmuel is sort of becoming the popular person here. Not Eli doesn't die yet, but the popularity of his kids, and Shmuel seems to be, his popularity is really gaining power. So let's begin chapter 3 in the book of Samuel 1. The lad Shmuel was serving Hashem before Eli. And it is interesting that it uses the term the lad, because the common understanding is that we're dealing at a time when Eli is already an adult. He's
Eli?
I'm sorry, I'm talking about Shmuel. Excuse me. Thank you for correcting me. Shmuel is already an adult here, and Eli is towards the end of his life. And this is when this story happens, where Eli's reign is, it's towards the end. It's probably like somewhere around, he's 40 years old. Shmuel is around 40 years old. Eli HaKohen must be, I think he died at the age of 98, so he's somewhere high up there in years. And Shmuel it says he's serving Hashem before Eli, Lifnei Eli. And the word Lifnei sometimes means before. So there is a commentary of the Malbim here that says that it means he was actually higher than Eli. Which is similar to a Hasidic interpretation, that whenever it's that there are times when it says Lifnei, that you could reach Lifnei Hashem, before Hashem, like Yom Kippur, it says before Hashem, your atonement. So like Lifnei Yud Kei Vav Kei, so it means the Jew is higher than the level, like that. Then your tshuva allows you to reach levels that are higher than the level of Yud Kei Vav Kei, than Hashem, Lifnei Hashem. So I see the Malbim uses that same license to explain that Shmuel is Lifnei Eli. He's like on a higher level than Eli. And the word of Hashem was scarce in those days. Vision was not widespread. And that means that there was not much prophecy going on. It wasn't popular. Yes, Ben?
I wanted to say regarding the use of the name Nar, Abraham also used the name Nar when he went with Yitzchak, and King David is using the name Nar. I think it's more like a servant, serving
interesting.
David, or serving Abraham, or serving Eli in this case.
Very interesting. You're right. Good. That's really, really interesting. Vani v'hanar nelcha ad koi. I and the Nar, and Yitzchak at that point was 37 years old, and he's called the Nar.
Right.
Very interesting. Right.
I looked up the one in the Judges. Is it Yeftach? Someone wants his son to kill the bad king, and the son says, "I can't do it. He's only a boy." And so the judge, I believe this was Yeftach.
He was young.
Gideon, get him. And so Gideon kills him instead. And it does say Nar there too, because I was kind of puzzled about this lad and Nar business.
And how old was that son? Do you remember?
No, he was just, he was scared to kill, so he wasn't yet familiar with killing people. That's all I can say.
Right, okay, it's not, right. It still leaves it vague, it sounds like, yeah. But that's interesting. Thank you. That's good that you remembered that. That's right. That's an interesting thing.
Oh, I looked it up when I saw the boy here. I've been bothered with Abraham calling Isaac the lad, and yet people say that maybe from the not the Mishnah, what do you call it? The Midrash. From the Midrash, it's said that Sarah died when she heard that there had been an attempt to sacrifice him. And the next parsha is Chaya Sarah, but it doesn't really say Sarah died then. It's just that's the next parsha. Right. If you say Sarah died right then Yitzchak was not 39 years old. So I have trouble with that, and that's why I focused on this every time the word Nar comes up.
Right. Okay. 37. Yeah. Oh, 37. Okay. Yeah. Very nice. Okay. Well, it's interesting, and we have Ben's insight. Ezra, what would you like to say?
Okay. In comparison to Eli, he is a Nar. And in comparison to Abraham, Yitzchak is a Nar. So it all depends on the way that, on who's,
who's with him,
who's looking or who's discussing the individual that we're interested about. So for Abraham, his son, even though he's 37, but Abraham is 140. So in comparison, he is a Nar. Same thing with Eli. I don't know how old Eli was at this time, but in comparison, yes, Shmuel is a Nar.
Thank you. Good, nice insight, Ezra. Very nice. So we got some good insights here.
Very nice.
And Gideon must have been a lot older than the boy who didn't want to kill the king.
Right, than his son. And Ben was very good, very nice insight as well, that maybe it has something to do with using the term Meshares, that he's a sort of like he's serving Hashem. So being a servant gives you the term Nar. Very nice thoughts, especially because I don't see commentaries really talking about it. So, okay, so then we can continue. So the vision of Hashem was not widespread. And it happened on that day that Eli was lying in his place. Eli's shoichev b'makoimai, in his place, and his eyes started to become dim. He could not see. Now, the commentaries explain that he started to become his eyes started to become dim. He's not fully blind, but his eyes had started to become dim. And I think I mentioned last week that there is a medrash that says that when a person has a child who's a rasha, who's wicked, so it causes them to become blind, and that we find by Yitzchak the same thing, that when Yitzchak, being that he had a son Esav, it caused him to become blind. And the same thing is with Eli, that at least at this point his kids are considered Rishayim, at least for the sin that they did, even though in a certain sense they have elements of righteousness, but they are considered Rishayim because of their involvement with this, or the way they acted in the Mishkan. Now, Eli, it says he was sleeping in his place, and now comes the next verse, and it says, the lamp of Hashem had not yet gone out. The lamp of God had not yet gone out. And Shmuel was lying in the temple of Hashem where the ark was. So the commentaries explain that Shmuel, of course, was not in the actual sanctuary, but it means the light of Hashem did not go out in the sanctuary. Skip out the words Shmuel is lying. That's like a separate sentence. Shmuel is lying down, but the sentence reads if you skip out those words. So you read it, the light of Hashem had not yet gone out in the temple of Hashem where the ark was. And that means the menorah. The menorah, the lights of the menorah were still burning. They would burn all evening until the morning, and they still hadn't gone out and Shmuel was lying. So why does it put Shmuel there? It also gives this implication that Shmuel is lying in the Heichal, in the sanctuary, in the temple, which is not allowed. Even it says even no one's even allowed to sit down in the sanctuary. Only Malchei Beis David, only kings from the house of David were allowed to sit down in the sanctuary or in the Beis Hamikdash, and other people were not allowed to sit there. How much more so to lie down there? So why is it implying that? And also, if you compare it to Eli lying down in his place and Shmuel is lying in the Heichal. Now, Eli's the Kohen and Shmuel is a Levite. So how does this work? So the Malbim again has an interesting point. He says that Eli's mind was on physical sleep. He was sleeping in his place, in his physical place. Shmuel, on the other hand, was lying, meaning thinking about the Heichal Hashem, the sanctuary. That's what his mind was on. So he was sleeping he was lying down in a more spiritual way, concentrating his thoughts on the Shekhinah, on Hashem. And so this is the reason why it puts Shmuel's lying right next to Heichal Hashem, even though he was not sleeping he was not lying down in the sanctuary, but his mind was on that. Now, it also says, Terem Yichbed, the light of Hashem had not yet gone out. And there's a medrash that says, the Radak brings this, that it's referring to the light, the candle of prophecy, that it didn't yet go out, which means that Eli is losing his prophecy, or he's going to die. And before it extinguishes, there's already going to be the prophecy of Shmuel, meaning Shmuel's going to start prophecy before Eli's is extinguished. And that's the concept of before one tzaddik dies, before the sun sets of one tzaddik, the Hashem causes to rise, to shine the sun of another tzaddik, meaning the shine of another tzaddik. So that's the idea that before Eli is passing away, we have the shemesh of Shmuel, the son of Shmuel, the metaphysical son of Shmuel is going to shine, and that's also pretty clear from the fact that it uses if you know the trup, which is the song of the words, there's a esnachta. In other words, if you want to read this verse, the normal way to read it without the explanation I gave would be Shmuel is lying down in the sanctuary of Hashem. It should continue. Instead, there's like a comma there, which is, or it's like the end of a thought, right by Shochev. If you look at the notes, the notes of the way it's saying, the way it's pronounced, the way it sounded, and which clearly spells out. The Radak mentions this. It clearly spells out that Shmuel is lying down, and it doesn't continue to the Heichal Hashem, to the sanctuary of Hashem. Okay, so in any event, that's the story here, where Shmuel is concentrating on the Heichal of Hashem, the sanctuary, the Shekhinah. Now, the next verse, verse 4, Vayikra Hashem, and Hashem calls to Shmuel, El Shmuel. So Hashem calls to Shmuel, And by Yomer Hineni, and Shmuel says Hineni, here I am. And the word Hineni is an expression of humility. Here I am. We know that Abraham, Hashem called to Abraham, and Abraham said, Hineni, here I am. It's also an expression of alacrity. So Hashem called to Shmuel, and Shmuel said, Hineni. Now, Shmuel is not familiar with Hashem speaking to him. This is something new. So Shmuel doesn't even think that it's Hashem calling him, because he's never had this happen to him before. So he runs to Eli. Vayoratz, verse 5, he ran to Eli and said, here I am, for you called me. And verse 6, for you called me, but I'm sorry, before verse 6, but he said, I did not call, go back and lie down. So he went and he lay down. So this is, Eli thinks that maybe Shmuel was just had a dream or something. Why is Shmuel coming to him and telling him, thinking that he called him? He didn't call him. So Hashem continued to call again, Shmuel. And Shmuel got up. Shmuel arose and went to Eli and said, here I am, for you called me. But he said, I did not call, my son. Go back and lie down. And then Shmuel had not yet known that Hashem, and the word of Hashem, had not yet been revealed to him. And Hashem continued to call Shmuel.
Can I say?
Yes.
Can I say something, Rabbi?
Yes.
I wanted to say from the other sentences now we can see that Shmuel actually is laying down in Echal Hashem, because Eli keeps sending him back to lay down. So I think maybe Eli lived in the Mikdash, and because Shmuel lived in the Beit HaMikdash, and because Eli's family was occupying the sleeping quarters, he didn't want to sleep together with his family. He slept separately in the Echal, because that was his house.
Well, it sounds interesting, but why would you want to say that? Especially because we know it's not allowed.
Eli,
and I don't see any reason to
Eli
even
tells him, go lay down.
Go lay down. How does that mean if I told you to go lay down, would that mean in the shul? If I said, Ben, I want you to go lay down, would you automatically go to shul to lay down?
If I lived in the shul.
Well, who says that he lived in the shul?
Because
he lived in one of the adjacent rooms.
It said in the first pasuk.
That what?
I don't know, but that's what it said, and he keeps telling him, go lay down.
Yeah, but the problem is that there's no original laying down in the sanctuary in the first place. He's saying go back and lay down also in the sanctuary. In other words, the first thought of laying down in the sanctuary is wrong, and so when he says go back, lay down, he means where you normally lay down, which is in one of the adjacent rooms where the Levites were and were allowed. But obviously, it's not in the sanctuary. It's not allowed. No one's allowed to lay down in the sanctuary. The Talmud says this. So it's impossible.
Okay.
And I don't see where it's hinted to. The only reason that one would make such a mistake would be when it says in that other verse. But the other verse that I showed you, it has it's sort of like it stops.
Different explanation.
it's called an esnachta, clearly shows that there's a reason not to read it that way, and so we did not translate it that way. So there's no reason to even have such a thought. Okay, so in any event, Shmuel goes the third time to Eli, and he arose and went to Eli, and he said, "Here I am, for you called me." And then Eli realized that Hashem was calling the lad. So how did Eli really realize this? So the answer is that it seemed a little weird to Eli. This also might touch upon your idea, Ben, and that is that Eli did not hear anyone call Shmuel, but Shmuel heard someone call Shmuel. Now they're living nearby each other. They're in adjacent rooms, and so Eli had to think something's wrong here. Shmuel keeps thinking that I'm calling him, and not only I didn't call him, but I don't even hear anyone calling Shmuel. So Eli had to figure this out. He says it must be that if he's hearing a voice and I'm not hearing a voice, then it must be that it's Hashem calling in prophecy, because that's the way it works with prophecy, that Hashem calls with a very powerful voice, but that voice stops right where it's meant to stop. It'll go to Shmuel, and an inch after Shmuel, it doesn't go to. The voice, the sound goes to Shmuel, and it's not going to sound anywhere else. So even if Hashem calls with Koil Hashem B'Koyach, the voice of Hashem is with power, with strength. We have in the Psalm 29 that we say in the Friday Kabbalah Shabbos, in the Friday night prayers. The voice of Hashem is very powerful, but at the same time, it stops exactly where it's meant to stop. And that is the way Eli HaKohen knew that Shmuel is obviously being called from Hashem. And this is obviously the first time it's happening, because he didn't think of it at first. Shmuel didn't think of it, and Eli didn't think of it. And I guess it was so rare, as we said in the earlier verse, that neither of them assumed that this is Hashem calling him. So this is now Shmuel understands what's going on. So Eli is now going to educate Shmuel what you do when Hashem calls you. So we're in verse 9. And before we do verse 9, what's interesting is it uses this term hineni 3 times. Every time Shmuel went to Eli, he kept using this word, here I am, here I am. So one of the commentaries mentions, it shows of how normally, when someone calls you and then they tell you it's not important, you normally take the next time he calls you, you take it less seriously. And then the third time, for sure, you take it less seriously. And here, Shmuel had such respect for Eli that each time he went with the same alacrity and he rushed to serve Eli. I should also mention that we said earlier that Eli was becoming blind. So Shmuel was actually very involved in helping Eli with his personal needs. So Shmuel was serving Eli as an aide, and so he felt responsible to take good care of Eli. So we're in verse 9. Eli said to Shmuel, go and lie down. And if he calls you, you should say, speak Hashem, for your servant is listening. So he tells him to use Hashem's name. And Daber Hashem ki shomea avdecha. Speak Hashem. So this is the way Eli tells Shmuel to accept the prophecy. You're supposed to say Daber Hashem, because you speak Hashem because your servant is listening. Now, what did Shmuel do? So Shmuel went and he lay down in his place. And I must say that I wonder what the Malbim is going to do here, where it says he went down and he slept in his place. I wonder if the Malbim now is going to explain this time when it says in his place. Earlier we said that only Eli. Oh, so he has an explanation. In the place of his thoughts where he was earlier. He was preparing himself for a prophecy. Now he started preparing himself for prophecy. So when it says in his place, means the place where he was, his thoughts that he had earlier about the sanctuary of Hashem, and now he's preparing for prophecy. So it says he went to lay down in his place. Versus before it just says, and he lay down. Every time that Eli told him, go back and lay down, he laid down. But now he's actually preparing for prophecy, so it adds the word b'makoimai. So now we're in verse 10, and Hashem came and stood and called as the other times. Kipa'am befam is the Hebrew. He like the previous times, and he said, "Shmuel, Shmuel," and Shmuel said, "Speak, for your servant is listening." Now, did Shmuel say Hashem's name? The earlier verse said that Shmuel, Eli told Shmuel he should say, "Speak Hashem." And here, what do we have? He just says, "Speak, for your servant is listening." Speak, for your servant is listening. Why didn't he follow Eli's command? So the Radak over here explains that he was afraid to mention Hashem's name because, well, number one is because he wasn't familiar with prophecy. So he was nervous to mention Hashem's name with prophecy. But there's an explanation that the Radak brings. He says he was afraid that maybe it's not really prophecy. Maybe this is a Shindalit, a demon. And this is not real. This is some angel calling him, some, because of it seems that Shmuel, because of his humility, he didn't want to believe. He was in denial from what Eli told him. Eli told him, "Oh, it must be Hashem speaking to you." But Shmuel didn't want to believe that because he said, probably like, do I really deserve that Hashem will speak to me? It must be a demon. And therefore, he didn't want to use Hashem's name in such a questionable, way. So that's the reason he didn't exactly listen, but he followed his thing. He did say, "Speak, for your servant is listening." And now we're in verse 11. But before we do verse 11, there is a medrash that says, interestingly, that there's 4 people that Hashem called with a double. He called Avraham. He called their names twice. Yaakov, Moshe, and Shmuel. And one of the explanations is that the reason he called them that way was because you are the same before I call you as you are after I call you. You have reached the level of humility where by me calling you with prophecy, it is not going to cause you to be arrogant. They had in other words, they were unique in their humility. It is interesting because normally we mention David HaMelech, King David, as someone who was excelled in humility. And here and we know Abraham excelled in humility, Moshe excelled in humility, and Shmuel, we understand, excelled in humility. And I would think the fourth one would be David HaMelech, and instead the Medrash says it's Yaakov, because Hashem calls Yaakov twice. Well, Yaakov also said Katointi Mikol HaChasadim. So Yaakov, yeah, I guess it does make sense. We have an example in the Chumash, Katointi from Mikol HaChasadim. He didn't believe, even though Hashem promised him so many gifts and safety, and he still felt that maybe he lost it. So he felt humble. So we do find by Yaakov as well the concept of humility. So that's one of the reasons why it has Shmuel, emphasizing the level of humility that they had. And there is another explanation in the Medrash, a little unclear what it means. It says it's like there were two of them, one for themselves and one for the generation. That each of these great people, there was like two of them, one for them and one for the dar. Echad loy ve'echad l'dar. A little unclear what that means exactly, but I mean we could could mean a few things, but the simple meaning would be that Shmuel was not a person for himself at all. It was he had his own life, but his life was for the Hashem was calling him as a leader for the generation, as someone who is totally given over to the community. And of course, there's the simple reason why it says double Shmuel to strengthen him, to the Metzudas Tzion says Lazares es hanikra. When Hashem wants him to jump up, he says a double name. That would be a very simple explanation. And the verse, we're now in verse 11. Hashem said to Shmuel, actually, I should mention there's a Rashi that says when Avraham is called twice, it shows love. So, no, was it Avraham? Maybe not. Let me take a look. It's a Chumash in Chumash.
While you're looking at that, can I ask the question about the Dor V'Dor? Is that a pattern and it skips generations? That each of them were in a separate era? And do we have examples in every generation?
Okay, so it was the thing I looked up. It's Rashi on the Akedah. It says Abraham. Rashi says Lashon Chiba. So it's referring to Abraham. It shows expression of affection. Okay, so could be the same thing. Would be Shmuel, the same idea. On your question, was that you, Phyllis? Who was asking that question?
Naomi.
Naomi. Oh, Naomi. Okay. So you're wondering, Rabbi, about Echad Loy ve'Echad Ladar, if there's generations that it skips. It definitely it skips many generations. From Moshe to Shmuel, I mean, there are numerous generations that it skips. It seems like it's only these four people. It's a little unclear what the Medrash means. I'd have to get a Medrash with commentaries to see how to explain it and what the commentaries say. But I think the first explanation is a very powerful explanation about that these four people had a unique level of humility. I think that's a very important point to mention, and that they were the same before they prophesied and after. It didn't change them. You know, normally a person would want to feel proud after they prophesied, and here they're the same before and after. Yes, Moshe.
Is it the case that the prophets, the Nevi'im, they're 3 times? Because in Gematria, that's very significant. You said 2 times for Abraham Avinu. I mean, what's the significance of, in the case of Abraham Avinu, twice, and Shmuel 3 times that he's been notified by Hashem? I mean, isn't that...
We're talking about when Hashem says his name twice in a row. We're not talking about the fact that Shmuel did not know Hashem was calling him, so he didn't acknowledge it.
But he called him 3 times. He called him 3 times, right? By his name.
Yeah, but it's not in a row. He didn't call him Shmuel, Shmuel, Shmuel. Well, in other words, what I'm explaining here is why it says Shmuel, Shmuel.
I didn't mean that. I didn't actually mean that, but I meant the significance of 3 times being notified by Hashem, that has a significance. Is that the case with most? You know, also the fact of Nevi'im, they have to lay down because they're asleep? Are they in a state of sleep, or are they conscious? I mean, what is the significance of laying down? I don't understand why.
Right. So it does say that the prophets had to lay down to receive their prophecy, while Moshe was able to stand and receive it. So this fits. Thank you for bringing that up. That's a very good point, Moshe, about prophecy and the difference between Moshe's prophecy and all the other prophets. There were a few differences. And one of them is if they could stand up while they received the prophecy, or did they have to lie down? Okay, yes, Ben.
I wanted to say that Hashem calls him twice, and you said maybe it's because there's a difference between what he is and what he is to his generation. I think it means Shmuel knows himself one way, but the people, the generation, the people that come to Beit HaMikdash know him in another way. They think about him as a personality. To himself, he's just a person. To the crowd, he's a personality. So maybe that's why he's called twice. Same goes for Jacob or Abraham, you know. One, he thinks for himself and on himself, or what he thinks to himself, and one, what the people think of him.
Even Moshe.
Even Moshe, yeah.
So how are you translating it? So it was. Why does it say it twice? What is your explanation?
He's actually considered, to himself, he's just considered a person. But to the rest of the people, he's considered a personality. He's considered something higher than the regular man, you know.
So he was humble. So basically emphasizing that he's humble.
He's calling on both.
Okay.
So
Okay. Sounds interesting.
On both personalities, on his as a person and on him as a personality.
Okay. I will just read you something from the laws of prophecy, becoming a prophet, that prophecy is bestowed upon a very wise sage of strong character who is never overcome by his natural inclinations in any regard. Instead, with his mind, he overcomes his natural inclinations at all times. He must also possess a broad and correct perspective. A person who is full of all these qualities and is physically sound is fit for prophecy. These characteristics do not themselves bring prophecy, but they remove obstacles that a prophet might face were he to lack them. When he enters the Pardes, the realm of spiritual knowledge, and is drawn into these great and sublime concepts, if he possesses a correct perspective to comprehend and grasp them, he will become holy. He will advance, separate himself from the masses who proceed in the darkness of the time. He must continue and diligently train himself not to have any thoughts whatsoever about fruitless things and or the vanities and intrigues of the times. This is because prophecy is not acquired in a short time or without great effort. Instead, his mind should constantly be directed upward, bound beneath Hashem's throne of glory, striving to comprehend the holy and pure forms and gazing at the wisdom of Hashem in its entirety, from the most elevated spiritual form until the navel of the earth, appreciating his greatness from them. And after these preparations, the spirit of prophecy will immediately rest upon him. Nevertheless, there is the possibility that Hashem will withhold prophecy from a person who is worthy of it. When the spirit rests upon him, his soul becomes intermingled with the angels called Ishim, and he will be transformed into a different person, will understand with a knowledge different from what it was previously. He will rise above the level of other wise men. As the prophet Shmuel told Shaul, the Spirit of God will descend upon you, you shall prophesy with them, and you will be transformed into a different person. There are a number of levels among prophets, just as with regard to wisdom. One sage is greater than his colleague, so too with regard to prophecy. One prophet is greater than another. They all, however, share certain commonalities with the exception of Moshe. And that is that the difference, what is the difference between Moshe's prophecy and that of other prophets? Divine insight is bestowed upon all the other prophets in a dream or a vision. Moshe would prophesy while standing awake. As it says, when Moshe came into the tent of meeting to speak to Hashem, he heard the voice speaking to him. Divine insight is bestowed upon all the other prophets through the medium of an angel, because their level of refinement is insufficient for them to receive the divine revelation openly. Therefore, they perceive only metaphoric imagery and allegories which reflect the nature of the particular angel. Moses, our teacher, would prophesy without the medium of an angel. As it says, mouth to mouth, I speak to him. This is last week's parsha. And God spoke to Moses face to face. He gazed upon the image of God. There was no metaphor. Rather, he would perceive the matter in its fullness, without a metaphor or allegory. The Torah testifies concerning him manifestly without allegory, meaning his appreciation of prophecy would not go through a metaphor, but through open revelation, appreciating the matter in its fullness. All the other prophets are overawed, terrified, and confounded by the revelations they experience. But Moshe, our teacher, would not. As the Torah relates, as a man speaks to a friend, just as, so that these are, I don't want to, okay, we're almost done. Moshe's mental power was sufficient to comprehend the words of prophecy while he was standing in a composed state. All the other prophets cannot prophesy whenever they desire. Moshe, our teacher, was different. Whenever he desired, the divine spirit would envelop him and prophecy would rest upon him. He did not have to concentrate his attention, prepare himself, because his mind was always concentrated, prepared, and ready, as the angels are. Therefore, he would prophesy at all times, as it says, stand and hear what Hashem will command you. He was promised this by Hashem, as implied by go and tell them, return to your tents, but you stand here together with me. This should be interpreted to mean that when prophets depart from all the other, when prophecy departs from all the other prophets, they return to their tents, the needs of their body like other people. Therefore, they do not separate themselves from their wives. Moshe, our teacher, never returned to his original tent. Therefore, he separated himself from women and everything of that nature forever. He bound his mind to the eternal rock. The glory never left him forever. The flesh of his countenance shone, for he became holy like the angels. So that's a little background to the idea of prophecy. I hope I didn't put anyone to sleep.
No.
And
No, we
Rabbi,
talked about it before.
it's Rabbi, it's
if I put you to sleep, maybe you'll get prophecy.
I don't know. I had a lot of dreams. Rabbi,
Yes.
um,
Yes, Phyllis.
what I'm understanding from what you're saying now, he did not go
Phyllis.
back again with his wife after the prophesying. I thought that he was living with his wife and children as a
Phyllis.
husband and
Phyllis.
despite the prophecy.
Echo
Okay, Phyllis. Yeah. Let me mute everyone. So let me do that. Okay. So I'm not sure what your question was because there was way too much background noise, and I don't know if you have two microphones on, Phyllis. But in any event, you're asking something about prophecy, and I can't tell you that I can answer that. So I don't know if you want to repeat it or do you want to ask a prophet or someone who's maybe more knowledgeable than me. I don't know what you were asking, but probably not. I'm probably not going to be able to answer it. So it's up to you if you want to try it again or not.
I'm asking if he went back to stay with his wife. According to this, it sounds like he didn't.
Moshe, no, Moshe left his wife. Moshe left his wife. Last week's parsha.
Okay, all right. That clarifies for me.
Yeah. Moshe left his wife. Okay, so we are on verse 11, and it says, Hashem said to Shmuel, behold, I am going to do such a thing in Israel that when anyone hears about it, both of his ears will ring. And in the Hebrew, it's titzilena shtei oznav, which means that it's going to be so sad that it's going to be painful to even hear. It's going to cause a person's ears to ring. And the next verse continues, on that day, I will fulfill for Eli all that I have spoken concerning his house, beginning to destroy. And what this is referring to is what we've already learned a little about, that Eli's house is, Hashem is very angry at Eli's sons, and he's angry at Eli as well for not rebuking them. And because of that, he already gave this prophecy to Eli, but he's giving it now to Shmuel as well. And the reason he's giving it to Shmuel as well is possibly because when Hashem gives like a dream to, so if he gives two of the same dreams, it signals that it's going to happen soon. And here it's he's repeating it, seemingly maybe with a similar idea that it's very serious. And he gives this dream concerning Eli's house. I have told him that I am executing judgment against his house forever. And for the sin he committed, that he was aware that his sons were blaspheming themselves, and he did not censure them. This is a little complicated. What does it mean they were blaspheming themselves? So the commentaries explain that it's not right for the Chumash, for the Tanakh, to write blaspheming Hashem. So therefore, it writes blaspheming themselves. It's called a tikkun soifrim. It's one of the examples where things that are not it wouldn't be right to say they blasphemed Hashem. In the Hebrew, it's makalalim,
Cursing.
which literally means cursing, but it doesn't. It means the commentaries say makalalim here means bizoyin. And if you think about it, the word klala comes from the word kal, very light. They took Hashem lightly. And the word honor and respect comes from the word which is kavod, comes from the word kaved, heavy. That means that something that you take lightly, you treat it lightly. It's like you treat it with you don't give it respect, and that's the word kal. So klola here, mekalalim referred. They were they took the honor of Hashem, and they were disrespectful towards it. So mekalalim, and they were blaspheming themselves, which, as we said, means blaspheming Hashem. And he did not censure them; he didn't rebuke them. And there is an interesting explanation over here that Eli, not only was he meant to rebuke his kids, but what is the main reason why the Levites were able to become, or the Kohanes got their job, got their position? What was it that gave them their position? So it was the fact that they did not sin with the golden calf. Not only they didn't sin, but they helped out. They helped Moses out, killed all those that sinned, even their relatives, even the relatives of the Levite family, which means if someone was married into another tribe, and they were from a different tribe, their relative could have sinned. In other words, no Levite sinned with the golden calf, but they could have had relatives that sinned. And because of that, there were relatives that they had to kill that had sinned. And the Levites, they didn't show favoritism to their relatives. Instead, they showed favoritism to Hashem. And that was, and because of that, they became the Levites and the Kohanes. Now, what did Eli do? He showed favoritism to his kids. He didn't want to rebuke them. So because he wasn't able to overcome that, he doesn't deserve to be the Kohen Gadol anymore. So he's losing the ability to be the Kohen Gadol, at least his family. In his family, they're losing those rights of being Kohanim and running the show running the show, I should say, in the Mishkan and in the Beis Hamikdash. They're losing their rights. And as we saw from the prophet who had told Eli about this prophecy in chapter 2, that the days will come and I will appoint for myself a faithful Kohen, and it shall be anyone left over of your family will come to bow down to him for a small coin or a loaf of bread, and will say, please attach me to one of the priestly divisions to eat a morsel of bread, which basically means that the other Kohanim are going to run the show, all of the family of Elazar, not the family of Isamar, the two brothers of Aaron's kids, that now Isamar is losing the rights because Eli came from them and Eli didn't rebuke his kids, and it's now being given over to the other family, Elazar. And so that's a interesting explanation, connecting it to the purpose, the idea of the Kohanim going beyond their relationship with their relatives. Yes, Ezra.
The verb here to rebuke, and in the first sentence it says, and his eyes kahot.
Dimmed, yeah. It actually means dark. Yeah. Keha means dimmed or dark. The Metzudas Tzion says choshech, yeah.
So would one then say because he saw them, meaning his sons, and he didn't say anything, he didn't rebuke them using the same verb, therefore his eyes became dim?
I did see something, I'm not sure if I can find it now. I did see something, and I can't see it in the commentaries.
There's something in the Metzudat David that they said. He says, "V'lo habam רצה לומר אף בשמוע דברי איש האלוהים, עם כל זאת לא חש ולא גער בבניו להכות מראות פניהם לביישם ברבים."
Yeah, but it doesn't connect it. It could be. Yeah, I'm not sure. I have to look it up and see if there's some connection. Interesting. It's an interesting thought. Ezra is saying that maybe the reason why his eyes became dim was because he didn't embarrass his kids with rebuking them enough. And if he would have dimmed, the same word is used, which implies like he was supposed to somehow rebuke them stronger. And the term is lahach, to dim their facial looks, which I guess would mean if someone's embarrassed, their face looks different. They become saddened in their face, and therefore it's the same term is used, keha, their face is dimmed, so therefore his eyes were dimmed. That's an interesting thought that Ezra is saying. I did see something about like one thing is a punishment for something else, and I don't remember where so I have to look it up again. But anyway, it's an interesting thought.
Yitzchak's eyes became dim, and he wasn't being punished.
Okay, all right. Well, it does say because his son was a Rasha. So maybe he also didn't.
Right.
Esau.
You could possibly say that explanation.
Rebuke him. Good point.
You could say that. So that would be a proof, not a disproof. You got to prove you're helping out. Thank you.
Right. I helped out.
But
you helped
but
out.
I don't think he used the same. I don't think he used the same term to
that his eyes became dim.
Yes.
Ve'ene Yitzchak. Let's see what the word verse is. Something mizaiken. Ve'ene Yitzchak kavdu, maybe kavdu mizaiken. Let me see.
I think so.
And I think from A.
I think it's ve'ene. Let me see. Ve'ene Yitzchak. Yeah, ve'ene Yisrael kavdu mizaiken. It says. What about ve'ene Yitzchak? That's by Yaakov. Ve'ene Yisrael kavdu mizaiken. Ve'ene Yitzchak. Vayhi ki zaken Yitzchak vatechena. It does say the same word. Vatechena Yitzchak. Vatechena einav me'ra'is.
Okay.
It does say. So it uses the same term, keha. Very interesting. Okay. So Yasha Kayach, Ezra. Very interesting. The Rashi uses a similar idea to that. It's not about embarrassing them, but to take. He didn't dim their face by removing them from their positions, from their position of authority. So basically, what Hashem wanted was that he should have rebuked them much stronger, either as the Metzudas David says, to embarrass them in public, or to remove them from their positions. Or it could be both. And it continues. The verse continues, and it says, "Therefore, I have sworn concerning the house of Eli that the sin of the house of Eli would never be atoned for by sacrifice or meal offering." And that means that normally sacrifices and meal offerings can atone for sins. But here, this is what they sinned in. Their sin was these offerings. So there's a term that's used. An advocate, a prosecutor can't turn into an advocate. And ein kateger nasa soneger. You can't use, like you can't the item that was used to sin. You don't use that as a way of appeasement. And so here they sinned with sacrifices. That's a big mistake, because then you won't be able to use them for an atonement. And so but the Gemara says that they're not atoned for with sacrifices, but they will be atoned for with Torah, with Gemilas Chasadim, with Torah study, with acts of kindness, and with tefillah. So those are the three things that will atone for Eli's sin, but not with sacrifices, because sacrifices were the area that they used to sin. It caused them to sin. That's where they acted very inappropriately by taking much more than they deserve, disrespecting the people who came to bring their sacrifices, taking it times earlier than they deserved, and ultimately that was the cause of their sin. Therefore, they're not going to be atoned for with these sacrifices. Okay,